everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unraveled and Rising podcast. It's myself with wonderful Kimberly Diaz. Hey, Kimberly.
Hello.
Terry's not able to make it today, so Kimberly and I are going to talk about a subject that is difficult to talk about, and it's actually not talked about very often. It's really just dealing with, if you have a family member or a friend who is either on hospice or close to end of life, and really the grief and the trauma associated with that, and how you deal with it basically, and also what it's like for others trying to assist you or help you through that process. And we really wanted to have a conversation about this because Kimberly is someone that, with their 25 years of experience in nursing and 17 in the hospice alone, this is something we talk about a lot. This is something that is part of her world and she deals with all the time. And so it's a hard conversation to have. And we know there are people out there who are going through this right now or maybe in the near future. So if you know someone, if you or someone you know is going through this, we would love it if you would share this with them, because maybe there'll be something in this episode that will resonate with them and maybe provide them with some peace and some calm and the ability to deal with it a little bit better. So thanks again for coming. If this is your first time, we appreciate you being here. And if it's something you come back to regularly, we appreciate you and thank you so much. So Kimberly, talk a little bit about, with your experience that you've had, really, what is the biggest thing that you're noticing, or how do you feel? We'll talk a little bit about not just the trauma and the grief around it, and maybe your experience too on how you feel. But what is the thing that you notice the most, the most difficult thing, I guess, that families or people are dealing with in regards to this? Is it just when knowing to go on hospice, or once they get there, just dealing with that end of life scenario?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just the unknown. People hear the H word, hospice, and they automatically feel like if their person goes on hospice, that means they're dying today, which is not the case. Technically, to qualify for hospice, you need a prognosis of 6 months or less if your disease process would run its normal course. Of course, none of us has a crystal ball. We don't know for sure how long that is going to be. And in hospice, you have to always be able to document to the decline. So that's a little bit different. In nursing, typically we're always, documenting how people are doing better. But with hospice, it needs to be to the decline. One of the biggest disservices I think we do for people in our healthcare system is we don't talk about it. Doctors don't talk about hospice, especially oncologists. They are some of the biggest ones that need to have these conversations and don't. I do have a lot of feelings about that because I recently read an article that 65% of an oncologist's wealth comes from chemotherapy. So if that's not something to drive them to promote chemotherapy, what would be? It's also just absolutely disgusting because when you're looking at quality of life, chemotherapy literally is killing you.
Yeah.
And I've also worked with doctors who feel like if they talk about hospice, then they've been a failure. It's more about them than it is about the person that they're treating.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our healthcare, one of the things our healthcare doesn't do a great job at is really, we talk about individualized care, but we don't practice what we preach. Yeah. And we need to have these conversations with people early on. What do they really want? Oftentimes I see people go for the chemotherapy, go for the radiation because it's what their family wants, not even necessarily what they want. So being able to have these conversations earlier than later is just so important. And being able to support your loved one and try to take your feelings out of it. And I know it's easier said than done, but any time that there's been a conflict with family, and I've literally sat by hundreds of people that have passed away So in our healthcare system, oncologists, we're dealing with cancer, are the doctors that are dealing with chemotherapy, radiation. And I recently read that 65% of their income comes from chemotherapy. So that to me is a conflict of interest and also a reason why they would want to continue to do chemotherapy, which is an agent that actually kills people and kills, cells in your body. So that, right there is a problem. And there's also the point of them feeling like they failed. A doctor that cares about their patient, that doesn't want to fail. They want to be able to treat them. They want to be able to cure them. So you're dealing with that. A lot of them aren't well educated on hospice anyway. So there's been plenty of physicians that I've reached out to get that hospice order, and them just, they're not hospice appropriate. And I, hang on a second, can I tell you why they are hospice appropriate? And some of them, depending on their ego, and I'm not bashing doctors. I work with doctors. We have to be a team, but they really do need to get more on board and start having these conversations, because especially our seniors that have been with their doctors for 15, 20, 30 years, they really look at them as the experts and are going to take anything that they say to heart, and they're going to do what they say. And if they're not talking to them about quality of life versus quantity of life, they're really doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
But, when I've had, when there's been conflict in the family, which oftentimes there is at end of life, it's never usually the person that has the terminal illness that is in conflict. It's always the loved one who doesn't want to let go or wants them to try, one more treatment. So oftentimes people will try that one more treatment, not because they want to, but for their loved one.
Yeah.
And I've seen many of people, including my best friend's husband last year, who took that last dose of that one more try of chemotherapy that ultimately ended his life. So would he have lasted a few days more on hospice at home? Potentially, we just don't know.
Yeah.
I never forget when I was at, in San Diego, when I worked for San Diego Hospice, I was a liaison of this hospital, and I'd basically go to the cafeteria every day. The case managers would know I was there, and as referrals would come in, they'd call me up, and I'd start to assess the clients. And we had this woman that was in her mid 40s. She had a pretty aggressive breast cancer, and she wanted to go home. She wanted to die at home. So if she wants to go home, we've got to stop the treatment. We need to get her home. And her doctor talked her into one last treatment. And so we had everything ready to go. And I went up to her room the next day. There was literally blood everywhere. She bled out and bled to death and never got to go home. And I have seen this happen so many times that at what point we've got to stop this. We are all going to die. We all have an expiration date. We don't know what that is. But to be able to have that quality of life, to be able to be home with your loved ones, be in the environment that you want to be. Some people don't want to be home, but usually that's because they don't want their families to feel uncomfortable about them being home.
Yeah.
They don't want to die in the home. There's a lot of, cultural issues and things around that sometimes. But most people want to be home when they pass away. They want to be able to be surrounded by their loved ones. My grandmother was a perfect example. She was the matriarch of our family, and she went downhill really quick. And I tried really hard, because Christmas was a very special day for her and in our family. And my mom had a very hard time of letting go, which I totally empathize with. I understand, but she was not going to survive this. But I knew in my heart she was also not going to die on Christmas because she wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And we were going to bring her home, but my mom didn't want to bring her home. And so sure enough, she died the day after Christmas, December 26th. And I still think about if we could have just had that last time with her in her apartment with us all there versus in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's, to me, that's what my grandmother would have wanted. But she also would tell me about her pain. And then because my mom was her power of attorney, when I would tell my mom, that my grandma would deny it. So then it put like us at odds. And I had no reason to say she was having pain if she wasn't having pain. My God, my grandmother was my person. I certainly wasn't trying to kill her off or anything. But
Right.
she felt comfortable telling me because she knew I could handle it. But then she also knew that my mom couldn't handle it.
Right.
So, things like this come up all the time.
What do you think it is about? I love when you said the unknown. I think it's absolutely the fear of the unknown, because the fear of death and dying. I mean, by the way, the fear of public speaking is actually above the fear of dying, just so you know, on the scale of things. It's like, it's crazy.
I'm not afraid to die. But public speaking.
Yes. So what do you think it is? Is it just that we don't know what happens after we die? Like, we don't know where we go or what happens to our soul or what happened? Like, what do you think it is? Is it just the fear of, what we've heard all of these years about? Is there a hell? Is there a heaven? Where does our soul go? What happens? Is the finality of it? What do you think it is about the fear?
I think that's part of it. It very much is linked with your spirituality. And if you have some sort of religion or spiritual whatever that you believe in, I think I've definitely seen that makes a huge difference. People that have something to believe in, no matter what that is, I feel like have an easier time accepting and being okay with it. And I like to listen to those videos of, near-death experiences. And I have never heard one that has not been this bliss and this euphoria and this beautiful thing, not painful, not mean, not evil, not.
Oh, I've seen those. They're on YouTube, Kimberly. If you seek it out, you'll find them.
I have. I've listened to them and I've seen them, and they're all pleasant.
There's bad ones out there too. If you look at it, there's evil ones out there too. Again, I feel like those near-death experiences are what's going on in your subconscious. And so it could be that you're thinking about negative things. It could be that you have fears that are back there or things that are going on. I think it's what's going on in your subconscious that brings that to light. And if you have this belief, like you said, in some sort of faith or religion, you're probably going to be thinking about that in your subconscious when you're at the end. And if maybe you don't, or you feel you have these negative fears about that, maybe that's what comes up. I don't know. I'm just guessing that's what it is, but I've seen some negative ones too.
And anxiety. And, I remember one of the physicians at San Diego Hospice used to tell us a lot of the work that we do as hospice workers is he was very much into the theater, and he would talk about it being theatrics because the body makes certain noises as it's changing and its breathing's changing, and it's nothing that's painful or distressful to the person, but it is to the people around them or to the audience.
Can you describe that? Like, what is that like to sit with the family at that stage of end of life like that? What's that like?
Well, it's, giving them the reassurance that they're okay, explaining that it's, the body just, some air hunger, what air hunger is. That's what morphine can help with, because sometimes they see them with these, gasping, and it looks very distressful and it's hard to watch. So that's a lot of times why we do the morphine and the Ativan and the different medications just to help alleviate that. They'll oftentimes also get a lot of secretions built up because they don't have the ability to swallow it anymore. So there's different medications that you can give to help dry that up so it's not so like gurgly sounding, things like that. And I've also seen, people that have the gift of a rally is what I call it. Some people at the end of life, when they're very close, they will have this rally where they almost seem that they're awake, they're alert, they're talking, they're telling their loved ones that they love them. I even read a story about a dementia client who had not spoken a lucid word in like 3 years and was pretty much mute. But at the end of her life, she had full on her rally, she had full on conversations with her family. They exchanged pleasantries and that they loved each other, and they had not heard her speak a word in 3 years.
Wow.
And then usually after that, what happens within about 24 hours, my grandma actually had a rally as well, which was beautiful and I'm thankful for. But then they kind of just go into almost like a coma state. And then it's usually about 24 or 48 hours after that they pass. But that's kind of, I've heard different things. The way I was taught it's that, your adrenal glands and everything kind of kicking out that last bit of adrenaline and cortisol in your body, trying to do that last kind of kick for survival.
Yeah.
I've also, read more spiritual things about it. So it really has to do with what you believe in. But I've seen a rally many of times. I always talk with families about it because oftentimes families brings back hope. Are they getting better? And it's not. And I'm like, this is a gift that you're getting. Just embrace it, enjoy it, video it, whatever you need to do, because this is your last hurrah.
I remember when my mom passed so suddenly, I didn't get a chance to really, she was only on hospice for one day and she passed. She went from the hospital. She was a week in the hospital. We put her on hospice. She was end-stage liver failure. And she was in hospice one day. I never actually got a chance to really wrap my brain around it or, like fully embrace it. And I didn't really know anything at the time. This is in 2019. And then her mom was still alive. And so I was taking care of her mom for a couple of years. And then I was able then to sit with my grandmother. She was my last, grandparent. And I was able to sit with her for 2 full days in the nursing home. And it was Vermillion, South Dakota, where I'm from originally. It's a beautiful nursing home. They take such good care of the folks. They do such a good job. So I was, she was in this wonderful nursing home there. And I was able to sit with her for 2 full days. And I was playing music for her. She was obviously unconscious, but I was playing music. I had this spiritual music playing, which I don't normally listen to. I have it memorized, by the way. I asked the nursing home if they had a CD that I could play in her little radio thing, because I don't have any spiritual music. And so I got this one CD and I listened to it over and over and over again. I had every word memorized. I knew every song by the end of the 2 days. And then we were receiving visitors. So I basically said, hey, everybody, I'm here. I'm in her room. If you would like to come by and visit or whatever. And so we basically had family come in and we just sat and visited and they saw her and all that kind of stuff. I had people call on the phone that were out of state and I put the phone up to her ear and I said, just tell her whatever you want to tell her. And we put the phone up to her ear and, and I wasn't there when she actually passed because it was in the middle of the night, but they called me and told me that she was close. And they asked me if I wanted to come up. And I said, no, just let me know when she's passed. I want to discuss that too, Kimberly, because I think there's some people who aren't comfortable being bedside with someone in that state. I'm not real comfortable with gurgling and noises and things like that. I've never been I have my threshold as far as being able to deal with fluids and noises and things like that is very low.
Yeah.
So I'm not good at that kind of stuff. And I recognize that about myself, but there's no shame in that because I was with her for the 2 days. And then I thought, I don't want to be there when she actually passes.
Yeah.
I just can't, I can't take that experience or whatever. And I don't want people to feel ashamed about that. But They did. I told them to call me when she passed and they called me when she had passed. And then I actually went over there at 2:00 in the morning because I was very close. It was only 5 minutes away from me. And I just went in there and sat with her, peacefully sat with her at when she was passed. She was still warm because I did touch her and she was still warm and stuff. And so I just sat there and cried and just watched her and just had a moment to myself with her. And I am so grateful for that experience. It makes me teary-eyed just thinking about it. I wish I would have had that with my mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
That reminds me of a client that when I was director of nursing at the last hospice I worked at, and Terry actually was a nurse on this client. He very stubborn guy. And he was hospice appropriate. We got him on hospice. And he and I had a connection that we didn't really realize. And that was that he lived on the same block. Now, this was in San Diego. I grew up in Downers Grove, Illinois. He lived on the same block, 2 houses down from where I grew up, but moved from there 10 years before I moved in. So when we made that connection, I still remember the farm. I remember all of that. I was in, you know what I mean? It was like, once that was it, I was in. And me and his one daughter developed a very good rapport. This client and I developed a very good rapport. So we talked a lot about what he would want at the end of life, something he didn't talk to his kids about because he wasn't comfortable and didn't think they would be comfortable. And these are a lot of the conversations that I get to have with people that I just really cherish. But he made it very clear that when the time came, he wanted to die alone. Now, that's very important to know if somebody wants to die alone. I don't have to question, why do you want to die alone? But you want to die alone. So how can we make that happen? And another big thing for him, and I told him this was going to come up, is he was an atheist. And his wife, who had passed previously, was a devout Christian. Now, this man would go to the church, he would help set up, he would volunteer, but he just didn't believe. But he was just
supporting her belief.
Yes. And somebody had told him that because he didn't believe, he would never see her again. And that, I could see the look on his face. That weighed really, really heavy on him. So he and I had a long conversation about that. I reassured him, which again, I'm now a spiritual person. I grew up Catholic, had a lot of, just really bad experiences with religion in my life. So I pretty much for a long time didn't believe in anything. And now I realize that that was a gift because I was able to go in there as a blank slate for people and help support them in what they believed in, because what I believe in doesn't matter. And I didn't have any strong beliefs about anything. So that made it really easy for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, he got to the point where we had to put him inpatient. And because he was having some symptoms out of control that his assisted living, actually was an independent living, couldn't manage. And he had shared with me that him and his wife really enjoyed plays, and Phantom of the Opera was one of their favorites. So when we put him inpatient, I would go and check on him every day. And the staff at the nursing home called me the one day and they said, you know what, he was up screaming all night in pain. We can't get his pain under control. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to be there. So I brought my diffuser. I brought my lavender lotion. I called his one daughter that I was close with. I had her call her other sister so everybody could be there. And I had shared with the other sister too, that he didn't want to die alone. The other sister, of course, thought we were lying, which why would we do that? But at any rate, so there was this family friction, unfortunately, for that. But you know what? I don't get in the middle of that. He's my concern. That's it. I can, just the rest is all noise. They need to deal with their problems. He's who I'm here for. And I got there at about 7:30 in the morning. He was very restless, very uncomfortable. We talked about his wife. We talked about, that he would be able, he would be seeing her again. I put Phantom of the Opera on my phone, which I put next to his ear. I was massaging his hands. I had lavender diffuser going. His daughter was in and out. And it got to be, we finally got him calmed down in the afternoon. He wanted me to open a window. We had talked about that. So I had opened the window. And it got to be about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So I was there for about 12 hours. I had told people at the office, I said, I'm staying with him until he passes. I said, he's ready, but I knew his spirituality. I knew this piece was going to hang him up at the end.
Yeah.
And I promised him that I would be there for him. So I was. But it was about maybe 7:30 at night, and his one daughter was there. And I told her, I said, he's ready. I said, I'm going to go. I said, I need you to promise me that you'll leave within the next 20 minutes. I said, because he will not pass if you are here. And she said, okay. So she texted me about 20 minutes later that she had left. And so she was going home. I was just about getting home, and we got the call from the nursing home that he passed. So we both went back. But had we been there, this would have just drug out, because he knew what he wanted. He wanted to have that peace. That spiritual part of him needed to be filled.
Yeah.
And he needed to be alone, because that's how he wanted to pass. I've also had the clients that, like, why are they still here? They're still hanging on. And I've had to tell some of the nurses that work for me, I said, you need to dig further. There's either a daughter, there's somebody there that they have not said goodbye to.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this one woman. She'd been hanging on. This was like day 8, and there's no reason she should have been alive. So I told the nurse, I said, you've got to dig further. I said, we're missing something. And then sure enough, there was a daughter in San Francisco that she had not talked to in 23 years. I said, you need to get her on the phone. So he did. She told her she loved her. Be tearful. That she was sorry and she could go. And within 6 hours, she passed. So, I mean, I've just seen this over and over and over, that it's so important to understand what's important to people and make it about them. It's not about anybody else in the room.
Yeah.
It's about them and what they need.
Is there something that people should know in regards to choosing a hospice? Like, does the hospital, if somebody's like terminal, does the hospital have a list of hospice folks they work with? Do you go find your own? Like, how do you find a hospice?
Yeah, so most of the hospitals will have a list of hospices that they work with. Hospice is a Medicare benefit that falls under Medicare Part A. So anything related to the hospice diagnosis is covered. So any medications, any type of equipment, briefs, chucks, wipes, a lot of things that can add up financially are covered. They should all have the same kind of services, but I've got a few favorite hospices here that I refer to.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with these folks for a long time and I've seen what they do, and I'll, often refer to them. And, but I'd say interview them. How do they feel? How does it feel? Because it's important that you connect with this team, because you're going to have a nurse, you're going to have a CNA, you're going to have a chaplain, you're going to have a social worker, you've got the hospice physician, you've got the volunteers. I mean, this is a whole team of people that are here to support you, not only during the process, but then 13 months after the death of your loved one, you get grief support. So back when I was doing hospice, I think the average length of day was like 9 days. That's what I was looking up now. It says now it's 90 days, which I'm kind of surprised, but I'm glad, because so many people don't get onto hospice until the last minute, and they can be of such a service for you in preparing you and supporting you, 6 months. And oftentimes, especially with dementia, they're on for longer than 6 months because they wax and wane. But we know every time they have a UTI or every time something happens, their baseline is never what it used to be. So there's still this decline that you can justify. So I always, I had a conversation with a client today, at least get palliative medicine on board. That's kind of the stepping stone to hospice. And the hospices I prefer to work with also have a palliative program.
What's palliative again?
So palliative care is about symptom management.
Oh, okay.
It's about pain control, but you can still get aggressive treatment. So you could be on chemotherapy and get palliative care. But now you have some experience with this team that's here to support you. And then once you are hospice appropriate, it's just a quick flip. over to hospice, and you already know your team, you already know your people, but they can help with medication management. They can help with grief support. They have palliative isn't quite nailed in is, exact how it should be as other things are, but it's still a great place to start. And there's no downside. And even with hospice, you can always graduate off hospice. If you get better and you're no longer meeting the hospice criteria, you graduate. So what's the downside?
Yeah. It's not like you're going, oh, I'm sorry, you're on hospice, you have to stay here,
Yeah, exactly. And if you get worse again, well, then you can go on. You can go on and off as many times as you need to.
Yeah. When you say hospice appropriate, does that mean the doctor has to say that the end of life is near to approve the hospice, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's technically 2 physicians have to sign what's called the CTI, which is a certification of terminal illness, saying in their I can't think of the word I'm trying to say, in their opinion, in their medical, that the prognosis is 6 months or less. It's usually the referring physician, and then the hospice team is going to come out and do their own evaluation. And then I used to be an admissions nurse, so I would then call my hospice doctor and say, here's what I'm seeing. Here is why I think this person is appropriate or not appropriate.
I see.
And then they're both signing off.
Got it.
And oftentimes the primary care physician will just let the hospice doc take over because that's their specialty, and then just kind of let them know when the client passes. Because in hospice, sometimes we're adjusting medications daily or multiple times a day. So a primary care physician who's also running a practice with hundreds of people doesn't have the expertise, nor do they have the time to manage that type of changes. And even the drugs that we use in hospice are different. A lot of them we have to get from compounding, pharmacies, and they're specialty drugs. Some drugs we use are for the side effects. So it's just its own specialty. So you get a good hospice doctor and a good hospice team. I mean, it makes all the difference.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
So what is really the grief that most people are feeling? It's obviously with death just in general. I think people are, obviously with me personally, it's like, the fact that you're never going to have this person in your life again or be able to talk to them or call them when you need them. There's so much grief around that. And for me, I think it took me maybe 3 years after my mom passed away before I finally started coming out of that grief. Maybe even 4 years, to be honest with you. It took me, I didn't know that I was in it, to be honest. I didn't actually really even know that I was in grief.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And you think that, you're not in it, but you are, because there's just a feeling that something's missing. There's a feeling that a little bit of a depression that's kind of just sitting under here all the time, that you're just kind of like, not understanding, and you're I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Kind of that gnawing feeling in your gut, kind of always. Well, and I tried, like my mom was a perfect example. I tried to, because my mom devoted so much of her time to my grandmother in the last few years of her life, bringing her, she lived in an assisted living, but bringing her groceries and doing this and doing that. And I knew that my grandma was now my mom's purpose. So I was really concerned for her that once she passed, she was going to lose her purpose and lose her identity. And I tried to prepare her for that. And that's exactly what happened. And she told us, I think it was about 2.5 years, where she felt like she finally kind of snapped out of it.
Yeah.
My good friend that lost her husband, I'm sure she's still dealing with it, but she said that it was, the first year, she said, and it was just a year this past August. So it's still very fresh, plus 3 teenagers and all sorts of things going on there. But that she could get out of bed again, that she didn't just feel like, hiding under the covers and just, and then there's something that people don't talk about, which is the anticipatory grief. That's the grief that you have before the person's even died, because the end is coming. Or in dementia, it's because you've lost that person that you once loved, but they're still physically there.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to deal with. And so you're grieving, but yet you have this guilt because, well, here they are, but that's not the person that they were. So, there's all different types of grief. And grief is something, like I was talking to my girlfriend, I said, why would you ever want to forget him? Why would you ever, you know what I mean? So grief, I think sometimes people just think grief's going to go away, or a couple of years later, like you're still grieving about that. Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it'll come in waves. Maybe it comes at a stoplight and, you see somebody or something. There happens to be a heart-shaped cloud and that breaks you down. That's all right. That person held a special place in your heart.
Absolutely.
And it's just
someone like you, Kimberly. Now, Kimberly is in the Denver metro area. So if you go to carematters.com, there's actually phone numbers and, you can fill out, there's a contact form and all that. If you just need some assistance or consult in regards to this in the Denver metro area. For other people that are outside of the Denver metro area, Kimberly, someone like you, what are you called and what could they find or do a search for in their local area if they want someone like you who really understands and can help them through this process? What is it called?
So, I'm a certified death doula. There's a lot of us out there. I'm also a nurse, so that gives me a little bit different set of lenses. But if you're looking for true support in just the end of life realm, I think, death doula is a good place to start. They can help with, some of them because I work with other death doulas too. Some of them specialize in ceremony. Some of them specialize in getting the legal paperwork and stuff like that together. I'll help with the paperwork, but I like the bedside. I like the help putting the team together, help supporting. We all have our specialty areas where we feel skilled and where, we can best meet our clients. But death doula, that's, we're pretty, we're nationwide at this time. So I think
that makes sense
to start.
Because I was like thinking, what would you call it? A death consultant? I mean, like, what do you know what I mean? Like, what do you call it so that people know?
Yeah.
If they're looking for somebody to help like that.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like death is such I call it the great equalizer, because in death, we are all equal. Doesn't matter how much money you made in life. Doesn't matter if you were homeless or living in the biggest mansion on the top of the hill. In death, we are all equal.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like, because it's such an unknown, I wish we would have more conversations about death, because I just feel like it's such a scary thing. And I get it, because, all of us are afraid. Like, I'm afraid to die myself. Not afraid. I shouldn't use the word afraid. Again, it's the fear of not knowing what's going to happen. Like, does this spirit move on to another life? Does it, it depends on what you believe, but it's like, it's just that fear. And I think if we were working on ourselves, and we think about kind of the rising of that, being able to work on ourselves and having peace and calm with ourselves, so that when it is your time to leave this physical body, that, you are at peace and you feel like you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, or you've,
for me, been able to serve in the way that I wanted to serve, and to, make the impact that I want to make. I used to be afraid to die, because as a Catholic, that's what you are. But, as many
You're afraid
people,
of everything.
Exactly. But yeah, not anymore. Not that I want to die tomorrow, but, when my time comes, my time comes.
Yeah. I was raised Catholic too, so I get that. And, my grandmother was such a devout Catholic, and I went to church with her she would go a couple times a week. And so I would go with her. And, she seemed at peace. And what's interesting is she died like on a Sunday morning, and in her sleep, and, or I'm assuming it's in her sleep. And we were in the room when she died.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not true. I think her two daughters were in the room. They just kind of pulled some cots in there and just slept in the room with her and that kind of thing. But, I was young. I was in middle school from that grandma, high school. The other grandma, she was with us until she was 96. So it was only like 3 years ago for me. Yeah. So I had her until I was in my 50s, which is rare sometimes for grandparents. But
yeah, well, that brings up another point too, is depending on your relationship, sit next to them, hold their hand.
Yeah.
let them know that you're there and that you love them. And if that's genuine,
Yeah,
you
of
know what I
course.
mean? Don't be afraid. I mean, they're not going to hurt you.
And I
They're
was
not.
very lucky that I had made peace with my grandmother by that time, because my grandma was a tough cookie, and she said a lot of negative things to me about, and this still stuff that I'm dealing with today on my personal growth journey, about my weight. And every time I would go in the room where she was in the nursing home for the last, I don't know, 3 years. And she didn't really decline until the last year, maybe, because she was pretty with it, mentally and all that stuff. Didn't have dementia, just normal aging stuff. But when I go in the room, she'd just say, like, God, you've gained weight, haven't you? What are you doing with that haircut? I don't like that haircut. It would be immediately negative when you'd walk in the room. And
Yeah.
I finally made peace with it, maybe a year or so before she passed, because I was on my personal growth journey.
Right.
And it took me a long time, but finally at the end of her life, I just put it aside. It's not me. It's about her. It's about her stuff. It's not about me. And I was also really upset with her because she was more concerned about my mom, what she looked like in her bed when she was dying, than her actually dying, because people were going to come visit. So, oh my gosh, you need to make sure her hair's combed and this and that and the other thing. And it's just like, for God's sakes, why does that matter in this moment? But she was all worried about it.
Because that's the only thing she could control.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I was kind of upset with her after that. But again, I made peace with all of that. So at the end of her life, I was able to sit with her. And that was my piece. I had to work on that myself. That didn't have anything to do with her apologizing. It had to do with me saying to myself, Michelle, this is not about you. This is about her stuff, how she was raised, and she was raised that way as well. It's a cycle. It's cyclical in her family, and I had to make peace with it, and I did. And so at the end of her life, I felt closure.
Good.
But I just didn't get that with my mom, which I wish I would have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is what it is. Well, Kimberly, this has been very helpful. Good. I feel like for me, it's been very helpful. I'm hoping others out there, that this has been a conversation that, we all have to deal with it at some time or another. It doesn't escape any of us.
No, and we need to talk more about it. We need to make it more common to be talking about it than, I love the death cafes and stuff, but it's almost like they're like this hidden little secret thing. And it's like,
what's a death cafe?
So some death doulas do them. They're death cafes that they'll have at maybe a library, or you could look them up online, or at a coffee shop where people just come around to talk about death. But it often winds up being the same people, you know what I mean? So as much as they try to, start talking about it, it's still such a taboo thing. And I just don't understand, because we're all going to die. And make your needs known. Don't keep it a secret. Don't put it in your, even lock up your stuff in a box somewhere and put it in a safe somewhere where no one's going to be able to find it. Put this stuff out so everybody knows. Let people know. Like, my husband probably knows way more than he wants to know about what I want at the time of death.
Yeah, Kimberly, I'm aware. Thanks.
But I'm like, I don't want there to be any question. You know what I mean?
Has he provided the same to you, though?
Nope.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's not comfortable about talking about it for himself. I feel like we always talk about your husband on this podcast. Just so you know, let him know that we are not like, we don't make this podcast about him. This is like normal stuff. He just happens to come up. Let him know this is no like cut on him at all.
No, he wouldn't take it. But we're just doing our estate planning now, so the conversation is coming up very soon.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
So he doesn't want to think about it, but
I get it. It's a time. We should do another whole episode on estate planning, and we should bring on a guest. I know a couple of estate planning lawyers or somebody that that can help with that, because I think that's another issue that is never talked about, and it's so important. It's so important.
Well, and we're also dealing with estrangement too, so that is adding a whole nother layer of competency to our estate planning. And different lawyers have different views on that, so we're going to be dealing with that. So there's a lot of things to think about.
There's a lot of things to think about
to that, and it's never too early. Like, truly, once you're 18 years old, you should have a power of attorney. Your mom,
my grandparents, they had their they had their headstones already there with their names on it, just waiting with their birthday, just waiting for the carving of
your dash party.
Yeah, it was already paid for in full. When they both passed,
Yep.
you know, we did not have to deal with anything. It was, they had everything with the, you know, with the mortician and all that stuff. You know, they had everything done. Everything was picked out. All her eulogy was done. Everything, not her usual, her eulogy, her
obituary.
Thank you. Her obituary was, everything was done. So we didn't have to do anything. And that is so amazing when you're already dealing with the grief of losing someone. To have that stuff completed is huge. It's huge.
We should do one on power of attorney and stuff too, because
should.
people don't realize power of attorney ends at death. So you no longer have control after your loved one dies. There's different processes. And if you
we'll do another episode on that, you guys, because that's really important. It's a good one. So watch for that episode in the near future. We'll do one on that. And thanks again, you guys, for coming. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Hope, you know, drop a comment below if you're dealing with this right now. And if, you know, we can, Kimberly can communicate with you even in the comments. You know, I can send her the comments and she can look at those and go check it out and communicate. And if you ever just want to have a consult with Kimberly, like I said, even if she's not in your area, she can at least give you direction for your area.
Absolutely.
And it's just go to carematters.com. Her phone number is there, the main phone number, as well as an email there if you want to connect with her directly. Thanks again, you guys. We love you. We'll see you next time. Ciao.
Bye.